This is VK6ARN, Newswest. We are a community organisation and we've been serving up the best amateur radio news in Australia since 1931. Hi there, it's Clinton, VK6FCRC, and welcome to Newswest for the 4th of February 2024. Now,
hello everyone, this is Clive, VK6CSW, reminding you that the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia's first bulletin for this year goes to air tomorrow. This month, as well as the latest club news, I'll be discussing Making the Connection, the story of the London Underground Railway map. This will be followed by Part 2 on the history of the transistor and its early development. Everyone, RAOTC members and non-members alike, is most welcome to listen to the programme and to join in the callbacks afterwards. Now some broadcast details. At 8 a.m. local time tomorrow, there's a transmission via digital mobile radio on the VK DMR network Talk Group 5. Please note that due to Chris VK6JI being unavailable tomorrow, unless we can find a volunteer to take his place, there will be no 80 metre or 40 metre transmissions at 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. respectively. However, the 10 a.m. transmission tomorrow via the Newswest linked repeaters will proceed as normal. On Wednesday, February the 7th, we have a D-Star broadcast at 4:30 p.m. WA local time. This will be transmitted via D-Star Reflector 91C and will follow the AR newsline. On Sunday, February the 11th, repeats of the RAOTC bulletin follow the 160 metre and 40 metre broadcasts of the WIA news. Full details of all transmissions, times and modes and frequencies are published on the RAOTC website www.raotc.org.au or just Google RAOTC broadcasts. If none of these times suit you, you can download the audio file at any time from today. If you do download the file, some brief feedback comments would be appreciated. The next lunchtime meeting for members and friends of the RAOTC is on Tuesday, February the 13th at the Woodbridge Hotel, 50 East Street, Guildford. We meet at 11:30 for midday lunch. An attractive, well-priced seniors menu is available which can be viewed online. Everyone's welcome to join in and have an eyeball QSO. There's adequate car parking, but if coming by train, be sure to alight at Guildford East. Repeat, Guildford East Station. Full details are on the club website under the heading Luncheons. Once again, tune in tomorrow for the February broadcast, and we look forward to hearing your call sign in the callbacks. 7-3 from Clive, VK6CSW.
Here's a spot from WAG. Have you considered becoming a member? $25 a year. It's got to be one of the cheapest memberships in the country. Do you use the repeater? Well, you're using the repeater now if you're listening on 2 meters, or for that matter, just listening to the news on any frequency, because the linked repeater network is the beginning point for listening to VK6ARN. But repeaters are fun things. You don't have to just listen. You can actually ka-chunk them, or get on air and make some noise, as Ono might say. If you get on air and make some noise on the repeaters, please do consider joining the repeater group. That's all we want to say from WAG for now. Thanks for listening. I'm Mark, VK6FIVE for VK6RRG.
If you happen to listen to the right part of the 80 metre band on a Tuesday evening, you might hear something that sounds like this. The CQ-QRS net has been running every single Tuesday for the last 2 years and has been unbelievably popular. There are usually half a dozen, and a couple of times up to 18 stations, popping in and out when they can over the 4 or 5 hours. The aim is to encourage new CW operators to have a go at slow CW in a safe and really friendly environment, where slow speed and lots of mistakes are par for the course. It's all about having a go, starting with a basic call sign and RST exchange, then over time getting better and better. The net also attracts its fair share of old-timers who enjoy helping others to have a go or just to enjoy the banter. So this might be just the opportunity you've been waiting for to have a go at transmitting on CW, or perhaps just to stop the contacts rusting up on your key. Doesn't matter whether you're brand new to the code or if you're an old-timer who would like to have a bit of fun and help encourage new operators by having simple, safe QSOs at their speed, we'd love to have you join in. The net starts at 0900 Zulu every Tuesday on 80 metres between 3540 and 3570 kHz, and there's stations in the west, east and in between listening out for your CQ-QRS call. For more information and to receive our weekly CQ-QRS RagTune newsletter, contact me, Mark, VK6QI, via my email address on qrz.com, or you can email me direct, mark.bosma@icloud.com. That is mark.bosma@icloud.com. Too much switch mode power supply hash on 80 metres? This might be the incentive to do something about it. With a cheap noise canceller costing less than $100, 80 metres could be easier than you think. So once again, Tuesdays from 0900 Zulu until late, between 3540 kHz and 3570 kHz. Cheers from Mark, VK2KI and VK6QI.
Hi, just a little note about VK6RRG and the WAG Technical and General Net. Having it run every Sunday morning on VK6RLM, that's 146.750 or channel 3 in the old money. And it starts at 10:30 a.m. this morning. Of course, if you're listening in the evening, it's next week.
This is Newswest, your amateur radio news on VK6ARN, originating on the Newswest linked repeater network and HF relays.
Next weekend, Saturday the 10th of February, is the Peel Amateur Radio Group Pug Fest or Swap Meet, located at the Mandurah Bowling Club, which is the corner of Dower Street and Allnut Streets. It's next to the water tower, and it's just up the rise from the Mandurah railway station. Doors open at 9 a.m. and it closes at around about 12 noon with the draw of the annual raffle with great prizes to be won. So make a date, come down to Mandurah with your mates, catch up, have a good chat and pick up a bargain at the Peel Amateur Radio Group annual Pargfest Swap Meet. Next weekend, Saturday the 10th of February.
Write this date up on your new 2024 diary now. Time, 0900 hours. Day, Saturday. Date, the 10th of February. Place, Mandurah Bowling Club. Address, corner Allnut Street and Dower Streets, Mandurah. Just up the hill from the Mandurah railway station. Purpose, Peel Amateur Radio Swap Meet and draw of the Mega Raffle prizes. The Peel Amateur Radio Group Mega Raffle is on again now. Prizes will be drawn at the event on Saturday the 10th of February. It is a great morning for all, and well worth the trip. Meet up with friends again and grab a bargain. Go to the PARG website at www.parg.org.au for more information.
Hi, this is Steve, VK6SJ. This week and next week, I'll be reading out some memoirs from Barry Burns, VK6ADI. on his journey through amateur radio. And this week and next week it's his time between 1965 and 1997. Prior to getting my full call, VK8DI, in 1965, I held a limited licence, VK8ZDI, that permitted me to operate on bands 50 MHz and upwards only. From 62 to 65, I concentrated on building equipment for the 6 metre band. Transmitter consisted of a Philips QQE/40 with a pair of 6V6GTs as modulator using the modified Hessing method, good old-fashioned amplitude modulation. In those days, the VFO was a Geloso tuner. The receiver was a homebrew transverter output IF of 7 MHz fed into an AR7 receiver using plug-in coils. The antenna was a homebrew 3-element Yagi mounted on a Stobie pole about 10 metres high. Rotation was Armstrong method, length of rope tied to the end of the boom, and ran around the yard to point in the direction as required. In that period of time, I worked hundreds of JAs in Asian countries, and I got a certificate from the WIA for worked all VKs on 50 MHz. That was a honeymoon period on 6 in the tropics. In 1965, when I got my full call, VK8 Delta India, I then concentrated on building equipment for the lower portion of the HF bands. By then, single sideband SSB was becoming popular in the amateur world. My first attempt was to build a phasing transmitter, suppressed carrier with 2 sidebands. This was fairly successful, but I was continually adjusting the phasing network as the carrier raised its ugly head during transmission. The receiver I invested in was a commercial unit, a Lafayette HE30. The antenna was a G5RV multiband dipole. Later upgraded building an SSB filter unit along the lines of a Collins 32 series, as I was able to acquire components with the help of a USA ham that I was in contact with on 20 metres. I later upgraded my antenna system to a homebrew 3-element Yagi for 2015 and 10 metre operations. I kept the G5RV for 40 and 80 metre operations. I was still operating on 6 metres AM, upgraded to a 5-element Yagi. Interesting story to tell after I erected the new tower and 2 Yagis on top. My neighbour came over having concerns about my tower attracting lightning. Here I used a bit of psychology. I said, yeah, it will, and your surrounding houses are safe as you're all in my cone of protection, which spreads out 45 degrees from the top Yagi. And if lightning did strike near, the tower will absorb the strike and discharge it to ground. Later in that week, a lightning strike hit a huge tree down the end of our street, converting it into matchwood and frightening the nearby residences. A couple of weeks later, I had a problem with the connection on the 6 metre Yagi, and I dropped the tower over to repair it. Next thing, I had my neighbours over showing concern and asking how long the tower was down and whether they could help to get it back up. In the mid-1960s, 3 local Darwin hams, Basil Broderick, VK8BB, Mike Richardson, VK8ZMR, and myself, VK8DI, got together over a glass of beer at our watering hole and discussed the possibility of forming a radio amateur club in Darwin. This was the Darwin Amateur Radio Club. This will be the subject of a future article from Barry. In the early 70s, he got an interest in SSTV from Doug, VK8 Kilo Kilo, who's now Silent Key, and as mentioned in an earlier article of his that I read, which was Introduction to SSTV. Alright, that's it for this week. Next week we'll do part 2B. Thanks, this is Steve, VK6SJ.
This is Newswest, your amateur radio news on VK6ARN, originating on the Newswest linked repeater network and HF relays.
You may notice that Newswest has been light on for content lately, and I've been playing a lot of repeat stories, but you can help us to change that by sending your stories or contributions through to newswest at vk6.net.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Amateur radio is an activity that falls between 2 camps, those who think of it as a service and those who approach it as a hobby. I think that the notion of amateur radio as a service is often repeated, but in my time as part of this community, I've seen little evidence of actual service. That said, the idea of amateur radio as a service is often linked to emergency communications. For example, a phrase used by the Wireless Institute of Australia is, Amateur Radio, a trusted partner in emergency response. On a page outlining the long and fabled history of our hobby in service to the community in times of emergency. Mind you, none of them in the past decade. If we look at the idea of amateur radio as an emergency response, what does that look like today, and how might we best be of service? The question that prompted this discussion centred around the best mode to use for emergency communications, and was presented in the context of a tool that links HF radio with email. But is that really the best way to communicate in an emergency? I mean, picture this. You're on a boat in the middle of the ocean. It's the small hours of the morning, you're asleep, and your boat just sailed into a submerged container, and now you're sinking. So the first thing you do is fire up your laptop, your radio, and link the two to send an email over HF to get help? Alternatively, your community has just been hit by a natural disaster, and the power grid went down. And the first thing you do is use as much battery-hungry, complex technology as possible to get the word out? So, until we can send email or a short message directly from our amateur radio transceiver, and I have no doubt that some bright spark is working on that, there are better ways to make contact in case of an emergency. From a mode perspective, at the bottom of the pile is Morse code. I say bottom not because it's a poor way of communicating, but it doesn't require much in order to get working. You could essentially use a car battery and splatter your emergency communications around. One downside is that you'd need to learn Morse code, and while you're in the middle of an emergency is probably not the best time. If you're on a sinking boat in the middle of the ocean, you're likely going to use a HF radio, or an emergency beacon, or even a satellite phone. But if you're on land, dry or not, and if you're not an amateur, your best bet is to find a 27 MHz AM citizens band radio, so you can make enough noise to have people come and find you. The reality, more likely than not, is that emergency services are outside the danger zone waiting for authorities to permit entry. It should be clear by now that there are several levels of emergency communications before we get to amateur radio. That said, if you have an amateur radio, then you're likely going to use voice communications over SSB on HF or FM on VHF or UHF. Now, you might ask about communications going the other way, from outside the emergency zone, where power and sunshine are plentiful, where you can use a computer without issues. Only thing is that if it's all peaches, why are you attempting to link your radio to HF, when on the balance of probability there's a mobile phone sitting in your pocket? A couple of months ago, there was a 12-hour network outage at one of the two main telephone networks affecting nearly 40% of the population of Australia. It was recently revealed that during that time, almost 2,700 people could not call emergency services on either their mobile or landline, let alone use the internet. You could argue that this is an actual emergency. But is amateur radio really the vehicle for making contact? I mean, you're trying to call emergency services, your phone isn't working, so rather than use a telephone on another network, you go and find your nearest radio amateur and ask them to call for an ambulance on their HF radio? Where does this leave us? In my opinion, the notion that your shack is going to be used for emergency response is fanciful. That's not to say that there isn't a place for radio amateurs. Far from it. If you really want to be of service, learn how to operate your radio well. Make a plan to work through if you hear a distress call while you monitor emergency HF frequencies. Visit the local emergency services to see if they offer training for radio amateurs, and make yourself available in case of emergency, and you're more likely to be of service than if you sat in your shack polishing your valves. If you're so inclined, planning for the next emergency, start asking questions. Find out what the plans are for your emergency AM broadcast network. Learn how things might break, and perhaps then you might consider amateur radio as a service to the community. Just not in the way you might have thought. Next time I'll explore the reality of amateur radio as an emergency response. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
Hi there, it's Clinton VK6FCRC back with you again. Unfortunately, there's no helpline this week because Roy's in hospital, so We've got a repeat episode for you guys this week.
Good morning, this is Roy VK 6 X-Ray Victor with this week's hotline, the 21st of January 2024, for radio amateurs and shortwave listeners everywhere. Today I have the following for you: an Mtron grid depth meter, model Echo Delta Mike -1, frequency range 1.5 to 250 MHz, has original carton and manual, as new, $300 for that grid depth meter. There's an Oscar Block power and SWR meter, model SWR200, frequency range 3.5 to 150 MHz, power 2 kilowatts, up to 2 kilowatts from 2 watts, and original carton and manual for that, and asking $100. There's also a Kenwood Tango Sierra 711 Alpha 2 meter all mode transceiver, $300. There's a Kenwood TS811 Alpha transceiver, multi-mode 70 centimeter transceiver, $300. There's an ICOM IC3200 Alpha and power supply, 144 to 430 MHz dual band transceiver, $350, sorry. And there's the Uniden UHF-CB, $100. Contact Barry on his email bravo.juliet.burns@bigpond.com or mobile 0428 959 771. I'll go again, bravo.juliet.burns@bigpond.com or mobile 0428 959 771. I also have a premium software-defined transceiver model Flex 6700 transceiver, 3 years old but in pristine condition. Comes with expert advice if you require any, and version 3 firmware, asking $7.5K or $7,500. And while it's the earlier version, it comes with the latest version controller. Amplifier was sold. Call Steve for that Flex transceiver, 6700 transceiver. Please call Steve on mobile 0447 767 518. 0447 767 518, or email to steve@kennedy-sierrajuliet.com.au. I'll say that again: Sierra Tango Echo Victor Echo, spelling Steve, @Kennedy Kilo Echo November November Echo Delta Yankee -sierrajuliet.com.au. And that's all I have for you for this week. If you like any items for next week in the helpline, please call me or email me on roy.watkins@bigpond.com. That's Romeo Oscar Yankee.watkins@bigpond.com or VK6X-Ray Victor@bigpond.com. 7-3 until next time. Cheers for now.
Hi there, it's Clinton, VK6FCRC, back with you. And did you know that Newswest is now on YouTube? Type in youtube.com/@Newswest weekly podcast -Kilo Zulu 7 Yankee Charlie. Oh, and before I go, I'd like to thank those watching on YouTube or ATV, the readers, and you for listening. I'd also like to thank our team, the broadcasters, and those submitting content each week. Please stand by now for callbacks after the broadcast, or head over to the VK6.net website and fill out the forms so we know how many people are listening each week.